We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so this is the October meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission. We've had Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please.
Okay. Brown,
Present.
Lapp, here. Baring,
Here.
Olver,
Here.
Gross,
Here.
Squadrito.
Here.
Shingles is excused, and McDonald is absent.
Okay.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. So next item is approval of tonight's agenda. So you have tonight's agenda in your packet. There's 3 new business items and the usual reports and so on. Is there anything else that anyone's aware of that needs to be on tonight's agenda? Or any issues with the agenda?
Don't know if it was made aware, but there was an addition to our agenda for, it's part of one of the items already, but it was just some additional information that was added, I think, to everybody's desks.
Are you talking about this letter?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a comment that's going to come
Okay,
up in the
okay.
public hearing, correct?
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
All right. But that's the way I interpret it anyway, so. All right. Okay, so anything else? Any other issues or comments on the agenda? So we'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as prepared.
So moved. Support.
Okay, so the motion was by Olver with second by Gross to approve our agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so our agenda is approved. Next item is minutes. So we last met on September 17th. So those are the minutes that you have. And are there any corrections to the September 17th minutes? I see that you, on the minutes, you noted that Commissioner Olver arrived at 7:07. I guess since he was here for the majority of the meeting, I'm wondering why he was listed under excused.
That's how I do the Board of Trustees, so I just followed suit.
So even if they showed up slightly late, but they were there for the entire time, the rest of the time they're considered excused?
Well, we mark it that way in the minutes because sometimes they miss a couple calls, so I might have 6 members approving, and then later down I might have 7. So I'm not sure if anything was approved during that time, but
Yeah.
typically that's how I do the minutes.
Okay, well, if it's consistent with your practice, that's okay. I just thought excused to me was like people that aren't here at all, but anything else?
For the record, fall soccer season is coming to a close very soon, and Commissioner Olver will be on time.
Okay. Anything else? They looked accurate to me, so.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Support.
Okay, so motion by Olver with second by Gross to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Next item is correspondence, board reports, presentations. First item is Commissioner Thering, updates from Board of Trustees.
Thank you. The 2 things that I'd like to talk about were big things, especially pertaining to the Planning Commission, is on 9/25, we had our first reading on the updated zoning ordinance signs. And on 10/9, we had the second reading and adoption of that zoning ordinance. The other thing of note is the board is now currently working on its budget, so hopefully in the next meeting or 2, we'll have that where we want it to be. Ready to go.
Okay.
And that is it.
Any questions from commissioners for Commissioner Thering on board-related matters? You're still accepting applications because we're still down a person, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. So,
that and along with the border review, but we do have I think it's one application for the border review that we just didn't have a full board at our last meeting. We like, if at all possible, like to have a full board for that. But that's something that's very important. So if there are people out there that are interested in that, please get your application in.
mhm. Okay, very good. Any other questions for Commissioner Thering? Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you. Commissioner McDonald is not here, and I don't think the ZBA met in the last month, so we'll assume no report there. Next item is the Community and Economic Development Monthly Report. That's, as usual, was in your packet. And if you had a chance to peruse it, we usually take a few moments and let commissioners ask any questions that you might have on anything in the monthly report. Anything? Okay, we'll let the lack of questions stand as a testament to the thoroughness and clarity of the monthly report. All right. Any other reports or any other items that people have that would fall into this category, commissioners? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. So at this point in the meeting is our first public comment. We have a public hearing scheduled. This public comment right now is limited to items that are not on the agenda. So if people are here for the public hearing, they'll have their opportunity to speak then. There's also an extended public comment at the end of the meeting or towards the end of the meeting for items that might have been on tonight's agenda. This is specifically if someone has an issue out there that's not on tonight's agenda and they want to bring it to the attention of the Planning Commission. So if anyone wants to do that, we'd ask you to come to the podium, give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. So public comment on this public comment's open at 7:09.
Nobody online.
Okay. Our electronic boardroom has just crickets at the moment. Okay, we'll assume folks are here for other items, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment also at 7:09. So again, there'll be an extended public comment later in the meeting. So we're ready to move on to our new business. The first item is PREZ 24-01, a township-initiated rezoning request for a .53 acre lot at 943 South Isabella Road. Proposed to be rezoned from I-1 light industrial to R1 rural residential. So we'll let Rodney introduce the topic, then we'll have the public hearing, and then we'll move into our deliberation.
Thank you. I should have a copy of our memo dated October 3rd. Attached to it is a copy of the public hearing notice. This is a township-initiated rezoning action, initiated by the Planning Commission. But we still have to go through all the steps for providing notices that were sent, both posted in the, published in the newspaper, sent to surrounding properties within 300 feet, and also posted on here at the Township Hall and on our website. We talked about this from before. As I said, this comes out of previous planning commission meetings and discussion. The report starts on page 16 of your packet. On page 17, you have the portion of excerpt from the master plan's future land use map you've seen before, just showing the location of this small lot, a half-acre lot at the edge of what the master plan designates to be the industrial area, industrial designated land in this part of the township. This property at 943 South Isabel is actually outside of that designated industrial area. Area surrounding it, so are planned for rural buffer, so rural activities, rural residential type activities. The other element that is required, even though it's a township initiated action, is we're still required to consider the factors for looking at any rezoning request, which are in the zoning ordinance, section 14.5, which is the section of the ordinance on amendments to the document, amendments to the map. Has a section, subsection G, which is just findings of fact, essentially. It's the title of it. And it has a number of factors to consider. And so you'll see in our report on page 18, wrapping over to 19, there are basically 5 subject headings there and some details underneath. In the ordinance, there's more or less some questions to consider under each of these headings. And we provided for you some facts, some elements that are associated with this site, this proposal, that relate to each of those 5 factors. So as we go along, I encourage you to consider those as you're looking at whether to proceed with this request. As was said, there's a public hearing required for this. In addition to the public comments you may hear tonight, you have on your desk that was received earlier today, comment from the immediate neighbor to the south of this site, the Feit family, Kurt Feit. And he's provided comments. I received a message today from our township supervisor indicating that he received a call from another neighbor who may be here tonight. I don't know the gentleman, but he was invited to come tonight. So those are the comments that we have received related to this request. And with that, I'm happy to answer any question you may have now, or certainly as we go along.
Okay. Are there any immediate questions from commissioners for Rodney right at the moment? Okay, thank you. So at this point, having heard the introduction, we'll move to the public hearing. So because it's a rezone request, a public hearing is required, and we want to give everyone who wants to speak on this topic an opportunity to speak. And so once the public hearing is open, we'll ask people again to come to the podium. Please give us your name and address for the minutes so that we have a record of it. And we ask people to limit at least their initial comments to 3 minutes. If once everyone who wants to speak has had a chance to speak, I'll consider recognizing people for additional comments. I'd also ask people to address their comments to the Planning Commission. So with that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this PREZ 24-01, the rezoning request for 943 South Isabella Road. Public hearing is open at 7:14.
Hello, my name is Jared Gallinger. I reside at 943 South Isabella, the property in question. Really, I just wanted to address some inaccuracies in the letter that was provided by Kurt. First of all, he mentions in there that we have animals that are uncaged and roaming free. Actually, if I could pass out these images. This is the pictures of the cages that we do keep the birds in. We had actually we bought those new this year, and we did have a problem where some birds were escaping the enclosure. Since then, we have modified the cage, especially the chicken one with the white fencing around it, to make sure that that would no longer be an issue. And that was done before the erection of the fence that he mentions in his letter. So to my knowledge, there has not been any birds that have escaped since our modifications. There were some other inaccuracies here. He said that we have turkeys and other animals. We only have chickens and ducks. We did have turkeys earlier this year, but those were processed more than a month ago, so well before he drafted this letter. He mentions physical deterioration of buildings. I do not know what this is in reference to. All of the buildings on our property are well maintained. And I did want to point out that nothing in his letter actually seems to be addressing the core of the issue, which is that we want it rezoned as industrial. All of the things that he says pretty much boil down to saying that we are a nuisance. And I don't think that that pertains to us being industrial or residential. Also, he said too that he has contacted us several times in his letter. We've only ever received one contact from him, and it wasn't about the birds. He had mentioned the problem with the lawnmower, so we promptly got it moved off of his property. We didn't realize it was past the line. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Allison. I reside at the property of 975 South Isabella Road. I understand that it's not exactly on for this, but it's pertaining to the same situation. I did prepare like a statement tonight, and I do have copies if you guys would like them. So I just wanted to read that really quick. Dear members of the Planning Commission, I am writing to request a change in the zoning designation of my property from I-1 light industrial to R1. I corrected that one. I put rural development. You guys know what it means. As the owner of this property, I would like to outline the reasons why this change would not only benefit my family, but also align with the overall well-being of our community. I currently raise hobby livestock, which I intend to use for animal husbandry and to teach my children the valuable life lessons of responsibility, care, and self-sufficiency. My vision for our property is centered around fostering an educational environment for my children, one that promotes hands-on experiences and a deep appreciation for animals and agriculture. It is important to note that my property is significantly smaller than the nearby industrial properties, making its use for industrial purposes impractical. I have no future plans to utilize my property for any industrial activities, and I believe that maintaining the current I-1 zoning is not in keeping with the character or needs of our community, just that area. Additionally, the rezoning to R1 would not compromise the health, safety, or welfare of the township residents. There has been no burden placed on public entities as a result of my current use of the property, nor do I foresee any arising in the future. Furthermore, I have observed that surrounding lots designated for industrial use have remained unutilized for over 30 years, as stated in your guys' packets, indicating a lack of demand for industrial development in this area. Since my communication with Mr. Gallané, I have taken proactive steps to comply with any necessary regulations, including reducing the number of my animals to ensure and ensuring secure fencing of their enclosure. Should the zoning change be approved, I will further enhance the property by establishing a fully contained and secure environment for my livestock. I also want to emphasize that I have not received any correspondence from my neighbors regarding concerns about my animals, my yard, or my home. This lack of complaints reflects the supportive nature of our community and the acceptance of my endeavors. In closing, I respectfully request that you consider my application for a zoning change from I-1 to R1. This change will enable my family to thrive while maintaining the integrity and harmony of our neighborhood. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and I'm happy to provide any additional information and answer questions as you may have. Would you guys like a copy?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Take one and pass it. I'll take one. Thank you.
Allison,
Thank-
can I get your last name again?
BJERT.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing is still open, so we're taking comments.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. My name is Rick Maley. I reside at 931 South Isabella, which is on the north side of 943, the zoning change request. I have a couple of concerns. One of them is with the amount of animals that can be on that lot of the half acres, and what are the intentions of the future of how many they're planning on having, or what do we do about the waste and the odor created by these animals, which I have personally, on a couple occasions, only a couple, not a lot, but on a hot, steamy day, I've had the opportunity to catch the wind of the chickens and the ducks and the turkeys that were there on my back porch when I was trying to have lunch, and I decided, well, it's not a good day to have it outside, so I guess I moved it inside. So I do have some concerns about the odor. I don't know what's being done with the waste. I grew up on a farm. I'm not opposed to having a few chickens, but you gotta have some place to get rid of the waste, otherwise it's gonna build up and stink. So that is one of my main concerns. And I guess if they're kept on their property, the livestock, which they indicate they are, I don't have any other problems, but waste is one thing. I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed, and possibly the number, some sort of a limit on size of operation. And as of right now, I don't see any information on what the limit would be. As far as I know, it's none. So those are my two concerns, and other than that, I guess that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Other public comments during the hearing?
I'm Sandy Hallis. I'm Jessica and Jared's aunt. And I just want to comment, I know Kurt Veit, and I'm really surprised that he wrote this letter because in my opinion, like Jared said, it's very exaggerated. Like Jared said, he only complained to them one time, which was not about the animals, it was about the lawnmower. So this letter, I'm just, like I say, I'm shocked that he wrote this, or maybe he dictated it and somebody else exaggerated, but I'm just really surprised that Kurt wrote this because I've known him for years. So anyway, yeah, it was very exaggerated because, again, he only complained to them about the lawnmower, not the chickens, and only one complaint, not like what he said in here. And as far as complaints with the township, I'm sure if he was complaining to Peter, that Peter's only complained to them about, again, the chickens, and nothing about all this other stuff that Kurt's complaining about. So again, I'm just real surprised with this letter. But anyway, the pictures that were sent around, I just want to make sure that you notice that white stuff that was put around the one fence, like Jared said, it's meant to keep for the chickens in for sure so they don't get out anymore. And that those pens that you're looking at are much nicer. They just ordered them, if I remember right, this summer or spring, compared to the old chicken coop and fencing that they used to have. So as far as him mentioning physical deterioration of buildings, I mean, they've got their house, their garage, and a pole building in the back. And then they had this old chicken coop, which they replaced with these new chicken pens. I don't know what other physical deterioration of buildings he's talking about. So again, exaggeration. You know, with, you know, I'm sorry about the smell, but I feel like we're kind of getting off the subject here with these exaggerations when we're talking, you know, there could be other people move in because there's so much residential property around their little chunk that's zoned industrial, or there could be other people that have chickens, pigs, cows, whatever, and it would be a lot more stinkier than chickens. We're talking about this little tiny chunk of property that we want to just turn into residential from industrial, because there's so much other property around there zoned residential. So I hope we can go back to concentrating on just making that straight line residential and getting their little chunk of property back into residential. You know, with their new fencing, their new building, they've really cleaned up that one picture that shows from the back of their house to their chicken coop. I mean, that's all cleaned up now, which is why we brought that one picture. Just everything's just so much better than it used to be. So, I just wanted to make those few comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, can I get your address?
580 South Shepherd Road, Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessica Candaris Gallinger, and I reside at 943 South Isabella Road. Jared pretty much covered most of what I had written down here. And I really am so sorry about the smell thing. I didn't even know that was an issue, and we will take care of it, because I had no idea. As far as the lawnmower thing goes, I also wanted to say too, when we got the letter in the mail, I just picked up the phone and called him, and he told me it's, you know, kind of on their property. I don't know where the property line is exactly, and I said as soon as we can get that moved, because I was the only one there and I can't do that by myself, we did move it back. And as far as like the blight and piles of rubbish, I mean, I am a mom of 3. There are messes, but we do our best to keep things as cleaned up as we can. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I did want to comment on, I apologize, I totally forgot his name already, in regard to the question he raised about like how many animals is too many animals, right? Because at what point are you encroaching on like a hoarder situation type of thing? So typically I just wanted to comment that you would do like 1 bird per 4 square feet. That's typical in the run. So depending on how big of an enclosure you had, you could calculate based off of that how many animals you could fit in that area. In regard to like their property and everything, I did go out to the property. Their animals are securely enclosed and everything. I wanted to see the difference between our 2 enclosures. Yeah, so I did go to their property, and their birds are secure in there. They didn't come out when I went up to them, and it is tightly secured. Otherwise, there is, I mean, the neighbors have already put up a fence, so it seems like as far as the sight seeing into their property, it's very boxed in regard to my property compared to like all of the other ones. There's a huge like wooded area in between the 2 properties, and the fights are using we bought my property from the fights as well. Julie and her friend owned my property. But as far as I know, that they're going to continue it as a rental, and they don't have plans as of right now to change it to industrial either. So I know it's kind of funky in those areas, but the ones that have the houses still, to my knowledge, they're going to be continued to use as residential. And my property is so tiny, and I believe theirs is too, that I don't foresee it being used further. But again, if it was approved, I do agree that there should be a cap on how many animals or within like certain types of security and things like that. I would agree to that. That's just responsible animal owning. But just my piece on that.
Okay, thank you. So the public hearing is still open. We've had one person now speak a couple times. I think everyone who's here has spoken. So if there's anyone else who'd like to make any additional comments while it's open. And no one has come into the online? No. Okay. Any other public comments? Okay, going once, going twice. So we thank the public for their comments. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. We've got a lot of public comments for the minutes, which is good. So now we're ready to move on to commission deliberation and action. Because this is a rezone, the action would either be a recommendation to the trustees to approve or to reject, or we could postpone it if we're not ready to make a decision tonight. So it's basically in our court now. Maybe I'll just start by asking Rodney, because the question was raised. Because this is a rezone, it's not a special use permit, it's a rezone. Any limitations would be only based on whatever's in the zoning ordinance, correct?
That is correct. And in this case, in the R1 district, what the ordinance calls customary agricultural operations, farming activities, is an allowable use. It's allowed by right. There are no conditions on that. And largely there's no conditions on that because Michigan has a Right to Farm Act that establishes the relationship between our local zoning ordinance and agricultural operations. It's an area we have to work carefully on. What the state has done is they have adopted a set, ever adjusting set of generally accepted agricultural management practices. They call GAMPS, GAAMPS, as an acronym. And these are guidelines. They're not requirements, but they're guidelines that basically folks in the agricultural area are encouraged to follow. There are GAMP standards for caring for fowl and caring for other types of animals, goats and whatever various animals you might have like this. There are GAMP standards for manure control. So the state has done a very good job, very well researched and updated regularly, a job of preparing essentially best practices for these kinds of sites. But all we can do as a township is encourage the farmers or folks, in this case, if they do achieve the rezoning and then are considered a customary agriculture operation because they're keeping these animals. All we can do is encourage them to follow those GAMP standards. We can't require them.
Okay. So Rodney's here with us. We have opportunity to ask questions. And
So there is no number of birds allowed on that lot?
Just those state guidelines, best practices, and even in that case, for the most part, they don't have any.
But the township has no. The township has
no.
Some municipalities, I do believe, have
numbers. There are some cases where some ordinances have basically an allowed use called non-farm keeping of farm animals. Our ordinance has a provision for non-farm keeping of chickens that are allowed in the more dense residential areas, R2A, R2B, and such. It is basically it's a very limited standard. It has a maximum number of chickens, and it's only for educational purposes. So whoever does it has to show they have an educational purpose for having them. But that standard does not apply in the Ag district or the R1 district, where essentially those are treated as agricultural activities. Now, there's nothing to say we can't adopt something like that. But again, we have to work carefully so that we're not interfering, running afoul of the Right to Farm Act. We can do it. We just have to tread carefully there.
Did you say running afoul?
I did.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I did say it on purpose, I must admit.
Are there any other mechanisms by which a property that is zoned for agricultural could be kept up to standards that do not include zoning? So if, for instance, this was rezoned to an agricultural R1 zone, animal control or civil actions I'm not certain, but is there any other means by which complainants can address the potential issues such as the ones that were listed in the letter?
Well, I believe that any case where abuse or neglect is observed with regards to care of animals, that, as you said, they contact animal control and then come out and see what's going on. Certainly if there's a case of foul odors. If there's an odor issue that is severe, that is creating, hampering the ability to use adjacent properties, was described tonight, at least on a couple of occasions. Can be a civil matter between the property owners. It can be addressed in court.
Okay.
It's certainly not the preferred way. And the township has received calls, even in those kinds of cases. And while there might not be an ordinance issue, we'll certainly just check in with the neighbor and say, look, we're getting complaints, and see if there's anything we can do to get the problem resolved. Sometimes all that's needed is knowledge. And I think as you heard tonight, at least for one person, there was no recognition, or didn't understand that there was an odor issue at some point.
Gotcha.
And that alone can make a difference.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that rezoning or choosing not to rezone is not the sole action that can be taken to address the issues that both parties are requesting. Because I think that what we have here is almost two separate issues. We have neighbors not being very neighborly potentially, but we have a zoning issue, which is I think apart from that. It almost doesn't matter if this were already zoned R1, if there is legitimate concern for animals let loose or property encroachment, that there are other avenues that people can use to address those concerns.
Like I said, I'd kind of talk about that for just a minute. Yeah, as you know, this started out with an ordinance enforcement action, started out with a complaint.
Yes.
You've heard tonight through the letter from Mr. Fite that he provided complaints. Investigation was done by Mr. Gallonay of both properties you've heard from tonight, 943 and 975, both which were found to be in violation because they're not zoned properly for the animals. In both cases, the notice of violation was essentially get rid of the animals. Now, in any case where we're dealing with an ordinance violation, our goal is to get the matter resolved. And we do give people, here are all the possibilities. And one of the possibilities is to seek a rezoning. That doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they certainly have that option to seek a rezoning to a district that would allow the animals to remain. So anyway, so that's how we've gotten to where we are right now with the property at 943 South Isabella anyway. But this still is a matter for ordinance enforcement. So for example, if the decision ultimately is to not proceed with the rezoning, then the ordinance enforcement would continue, and the proper action ultimately is for the animals to be removed from the property, because that's really the only way to bring the property back into compliance. You've heard from the owner at 975 who has been reducing the number of animals. She's been working on bringing the property into compliance through that process. The same thing would be required of this site if the rezoning action were not to be approved. And with regards to that, in any kind of a case, you can make a case for rezoning, you can make a case against it. While in this case our master plan does show that property being part of the rural buffer, it is a very small lot. It's a half acre. That's a small lot. That's a non-conforming lot in both districts, the I-1 and the R1. It is a small lot to be keeping a bunch of farm animals on potentially. Now, you've seen the pictures. You've seen what they do. You've seen how they're taking care of the animals. And it is possible to have a farm on a very small piece of property. I don't want to namely say that they cannot do this, but it is a very small lot. It is certainly possible for although you initiate the rezoning, it is certainly possible for you to put together a case based on the factors in the ordinance under amendments to determine that it's not appropriate to rezone the property this time and leave it where it is. And as I said, in that case, the ordinance enforcement process would move forward with the goal of removing the animals. Your action, though, in terms of enforcement, if you look at in terms of rezoning, it really is a yes or a no.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a yes if you do this kind of a thing, as you might have, as you said, with a special use permit, where you have standards for special use approval, but you could put conditions on an action to ensure that they meet those standards. This case is a simple, either you're recommending that the rezoning be approved, or you're recommending to the board that the rezoning be rejected. The rest of it would simply fall out through, however ultimately the property is owned. We would simply continue with ordinance enforcement, or if it's rezoned R1, we would then work with the property owner to make sure that they remain in compliance with those, with the ordinance as it applies there.
Thank you.
I would like to move to recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the rezoning of the 0.53 acre lot at 943 South Isabella Road, PID 140013000401, from L1 Light Industrial District to R1 Rural Residential District.
I second.
Okay, so there was a motion by Commissioner Olver to recommend to the Board of Trustees that they approve the rezoning request, and the second was by Brown. So there's a motion on the floor, which means it's open for discussion. My thought is, I mean, this has become an issue, obviously, because it's came to us because of the animals. But on the other hand, because it's a rezone, you know, the future land use and the you know, other issues really should, I think, take precedence. You know, when you look at the future land use map, when you look at what's already zoned R1 out there, 943 is pretty, I don't know, to me it's compelling that it doesn't make much sense to have that little piece still be I1, particularly when it's too small virtually to use for any reasonable industrial situation that you might imagine.
I concur.
I just would,
Recognize Commissioner Gross, and then we'll go to Commissioner.
I guess the thought that I have is whether it's rezoned or not rezoned, you know, one of the issues is the number of animals running in odor. Is rezoning or not rezoning doesn't remediate that issue.
May I answer? Oh, okay. I mean, I agree, except for as he pointed out, that technically, if we don't rezone, the issue would sort itself out in that the animals would have to leave the property. But yes, from all the complaints that we've heard, it's less of a zoning issue. The complaints are, and just more of a, I guess somebody said nuisance issue, and I believe that those can be resolved either between the complainants or through other actions, and that like he said, I think we have to consider the just purely the zoning issue and how it pertains to our future land use and the current land use.
I agree with that, but the appearance is that we are giving the nuisance people what they want versus what the neighbors are saying. So, I mean, I realize what we're talking about is a zoning issue, and I agree it makes sense within the zoning map that little piece be part of the rural residential rather than industrial. But at the same time, the whole reason this came before us is because of the nuisance issue. And I don't feel like that's been resolved. I feel like we're still hearing from neighbors that there are issues. And then it feels like we can't resolve those issues, I agree, but at the same time, it feels like we're rewarding part of this. We're rewarding one family in ways that seems to not recognize the real issues that other families are bringing based on the situation in this case. I agree it's not the zoning question, it's just the neighborly question, and that's, you know, we're in a township, we have neighbors, we have to think of our neighbors. You know, people have complaints about this or that, but I think we have to keep in mind that part of why we're here is to serve the township, not just any individual family.
by changing by rezoning, not that they would, but they would have the opportunity to add to the potential issue of odor and waste We talked about this, I think, the last time, about being responsible to all people. I mean, the property is small, and yes, if we made it R1, it makes the line straight, but it is, as you mentioned, so small. If we did nothing, if we did something, somebody could be adversely affected by that. I would hate to see that the neighbors have to go to court to fix an issue. Now, looking at the picture from Mr. Fight, I mean, you could see chickens on, look, I believe this is his property, you could see them on there. Now, they have stated that it's been taken care of, they reinforced, they brought in some new, okay. So now what if they increase the amount or throw on another one? So then Mr. Malley's talking about odor. I think that's fair. You know, I would sure like to see you to be able to have that, but that's my concern, being responsible to.
Is that balancing?
Right. At some point in time, this is what we got. So I'm very conflicted.
If we had the authority, like you said, a special use permit, like if we had that authority, I would absolutely agree that would be a great compromise. But it sounds like we kind of have like a really clear-cut issue where we only have a yes or a no that we can give, and in my opinion, it's. I think the fact that there are other avenues that the neighbors can pursue other than just purely coming to the zoning commission, or I'm sorry, the planning board, allows them to resolve those issues, and not just through the courts, because I know that can get really ugly and really nasty. But like, yeah, talking with themselves. Apparently, we have two neighbors right here who've never met before, and they're willing to work on an issue that they just now are finding out about. So I believe that has some potential as far as like being neighborly and resolving these issues peacefully. And I would, in a perfect world, I'd like to make everybody happy, but I think that we have to just focus on the issues that we can fix as the planning commission.
I would just, for me, this is about fixing the inconsistency in the zoning, and that to me is the role of the planning commission. Whether I like chickens, don't like the smell of chickens, love the smell of chickens, is immaterial for me. I understand there are issues with the neighbors. That is not the purview of the planning commission as I understand our charter. So I'm looking at this as addressing the current and future use is residential and not light industrial. And so I'm trying to take that black and white approach in a gray area. So that's why I put the motion forward. And if, Mr. Chairman, that was a friendly amendment to I-1, I believe I read L1 because I don't have my reading glasses on tonight. So I would make that stipulation in the motion.
Okay. I assume she got that because we don't have an L1, so.
Right.
And I didn't even hear it that way.
Well, light industrial, it could have gone either way, so.
Okay.
I can't argue with that statement. What you just spoke of is.
Other comments from commissioners, questions, thoughts?
May we call the question?
You can, or perhaps at the point where that's okay. I'm not hearing any more comments. So I think the question has been called, so we'll proceed to a roll call vote. The motion, one more time, is to recommend to the Board of Trustees that they approve the rezone request for the property at 943 South Isabella from I-1 to R1.
Not L1.
Not L1.
Sorry. Thering,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
Squadrito,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Over.
Yes.
All yeses, motion carries.
Okay,
Or passes.
so this will go to the Board of Trustees, and they will have, they have to have a public hearing too, right?
Yeah, just for the purposes of those in the room, the next step, this will eventually end up in front of the Board of Trustees. The next step is actually, because it's changed to our zoning map, it will go to the county. And it will be on the County Planning Commission agenda at this point in their, it will likely be their November agenda. And then they have 30 days to do whatever they want with it. After that, it would then go to our Board of Trustees for a first reading and a second reading, which could happen in late November to start with, and then go from there. So that would be sort of the best possible timing would be, it would end up being for the Board of Trustees at their late November meeting. But it will ultimately be up to the board as to when they put it on the agenda. So.
Okay.
I would just like to ask that the residents take into serious consideration their neighbors, so. And I'm sure you will. I think you've made some steps to keep things enclosed, but imagine if it was just the other way around, so.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on, because I know we have other agenda items, I just want to ask real quickly, the other resident who is at 975 gave us this. It's couched as an application, but I guess I'm wondering, is this, a resident can file an application for a zoning request, but there's fees involved and that sort of thing. Is this a request to us to do the same thing that we just did, or is it a formal application for a zoning, rezoning?
A formal application would not come to you at a public meeting, so you can consider it simply to be public comment, but no matter how it may be phrased.
Yeah.
Because a formal application is made by submitting the application form and paying the fees and providing the documentation required
Yeah.
at the front counter. So in terms of what you do with this, and I know this was a topic of discussion at previous meetings, and ultimately you made the decision to move forward only this site.
Mhm.
So it's simply public comment. If the owner would like to proceed forward with an application, she certainly can do so, but it just needs to submit that at the Township Hall.
Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest that we move on, and then we can kind of revisit this perhaps if we have some time towards the end of the meeting, just to discuss. All right. So we're ready to proceed. So the next item on our agenda is adoption of the 2025 schedule of the Planning Commission meetings. When I see that it's going to be 2025 next year, I ask myself, can I believe that this century is a quarter over? And I really can't.
You're still waiting for that Y2K.
Well, I'm just saying, that's how I look at it.
The Y2K collapse hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Say it like that.
Oh, so anyway, you have the schedule. I double-checked the dates. They're accurate. The only thing that kind of jumped out at me is that we have a Planning Commission meeting on April something or other, and then the unified all-commission meeting is like the next night, but it is what it is, so. Unless there are comments on this, I would entertain a motion to adopt the proposed schedule for next year.
So moved.
Support?
Okay, so the motion was by Olver with second by Thering to adopt the 2025 schedule of Planning Commission meetings as presented, maintaining our third Tuesday meeting schedule into 2025. Any discussion? Okay, if not, it's an official action, so we'll do a roll call.
Lamb,
Yes.
Squadrito,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Over,
Yes.
Thering,
Yes.
Gross.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Then the third item is labeled as master plan updated. Specifically, it's a section on industrial land, and so it kind of fits in, for at least peripherally, with what we were just talking about. But I'll let Rodney introduce this, and then we will have some discussion.
Well, thank you. As you said, this is a small piece of updating the master plan. This is an item we talked about earlier that having our township engineering consultants looking at doing an evaluation of the US 127 corridor from a perspective of infrastructure needs, with the goal of looking at are there areas along that corridor that might be appropriate for industrial warehouse research type development in the future. That infrastructure evaluation is ongoing, but I wanted to go ahead and put this before you. It reflects some of the discussion with the engineers, but not nearly the full input that we're looking for from them yet. But the reason I want to bring this forward to you is to just get a feel for your thoughts on these various areas that have been identified. As the plan notes at the beginning on page 22 of your packet, this element of the master plan is intended to address some significant challenges related to development of new industrial facilities in this area. And some of those are that there's simply no large tracts of land available that are suitable for industrial development right now. They were set up, property zoned for it, have the infrastructure in place. This is noted here is 30 to 100 plus acres. In the site selection world, they often are talking in hundreds of acres for these industrial sites. They're wanting, especially for large industrial facilities, they want a lot of elbow room around them. And we cannot get to hundreds for the most part, but we certainly can get to large enough sites that can function well for new industrial development. So we have some existing land that's zoned industrial, but it tends to have some significant limitations. There's land to the immediate west of the airport, west of Isabel Road, north of 127, as 127 curves around. But it's broken up into multiple lots. It is under the airport zoning that limits the height significantly. So it has challenges there. We have land on the other side of 127 near Packard Street, Corporate Drive and such. That area there has road issues. It has utilities for the most part, but the roads are not up to par. We have our Enterprise Industrial Park. There we don't have much land left available. That's actually zoned for industrial right now. The Bandit Industries property has some vacant land on where they can do some additional things. But most of the area where they can actually have new development, even on the Bandit site, is on the Somerton Road side, where right now there's no water service, and there's actually some lots there that are zoned residential, not industrial. So these are some of the factors with existing industrial that come into play. They're not, not in any way insurmountable, but they certainly are challenges, especially to try to do something of a larger scale. And we have, so Jim McBride from Middle Michigan Development Corporation would tell you if he's here, he regularly has requests for larger sites that are set up for industrial, that he simply has to say we don't have anything. So there's an opportunity here potentially to attract some additional development of this type, if we can create sites that are suitable for that. So as noted, we have the map that's on page 23 that identifies six sites. A couple of them have two chunks, but essentially 6 sites labeled A through F. We labeled them A through F. This is essentially my evaluation, my part in this. I labeled them from the perspective of sites that would meet the characteristics that the site selectors are looking for, but that also have good potential for being able to provide the infrastructure that they need. So what I'd like to do is to go through these And just kind of get your take on, are we heading in the right direction? This is not intended to be the end of this section of the master plan. There will be more that would come to put some more meat on these bones. But before we put meat on the bones, I wanted to kind of get from you your thoughts on the direction this is aimed at right now. So if you'd like, we can just kind of start with A and move through.
Okay.
So Site A, you see there, it's kind of centered on Broomfield Road. It's east of 127. You have about 400 acres south of Broomfield Road. You have about 120 useful acres north of Broomfield Road before you run into some drains and wetlands. So fairly large sites. Water and sewer are available on the other side of the freeway. So they would have to be brought under the freeway to the site, but that is actually plans for the future of water and sewer systems allowed for that potential at this location. This site, if you look at US 127, you see sort of the diamond there. It is a site that MDOT thought might end up being an interchange at some point. Now that's a very old design. They would need additional right of way to do an interchange there now. But nonetheless, that was sort of where the thinking had been. On the map, you'll see the orange and red. The orange is force main through the sewer main, and you see the red of gravity-fed sewers through there. So you can see the force main runs along 127. It is possible to connect into that. It would likely require a new pumping station. Water is, you can see water there on Isabella Road. Again, there's significant pipe size there on Isabella Road. But nonetheless, it would have to be brought across to the east side of 127. So this really is the site that has potential to, if it were set up for in terms of the infrastructure, it would have potential for a large industrial user. There are some significant infrastructure challenges that need to be overcome, and before this property should be zoned industrial, some of those things would need to be taken care of. So that's one of the elements of the master plan would talk about. In this section, we talk about improvements needed. One of the things I think in the ultimate plan is we would be identifying before this property is ready to be zoned industrial, these things need to either be in place or be set up to happen, essentially. So that we would be more specific on what needs to be done before the property will be ready to change over.
Rodney, how does current property ownership play into the master plan and potential rezoning? And I don't have a good sense of what's there now or who has it.
Well, most of the acreage is farmed right now. There's some a couple of small lots with homes on them, and some large tracts with farmed and farmhouses and buildings on them. In terms of the master plan, we don't really look at current ownership. We're not certainly owners come in and tell you what they prefer to have happen, just as you've already seen. But in terms of planning, we're really looking at what is the best course for the community for the future. Now, frankly, that may benefit certain property owners that own land along this corridor. People land with freeway frontage always has value, and so it certainly it would be a significant benefit if the property could be zoned industrial. But as I said, there are some pretty significant infrastructure upgrades that need to be done. One of the things for this site we also talked about is the likely need for a new water tower to be able to serve that side of the community. Proper water pressure, especially for industrial activity, it's going to need to have sprinklers, and probably many industrial activities have a pretty high water demand. So there's some big investments that would need to happen in order to make it possible.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things that I've heard a lot from the development
folks is that we do not have these large parcels that have potential to bring an industry type. They require those big footprints. And we, you know, as currently, what's our largest that's currently zoned industrial? It's not that large, I don't believe.
No, we have parcels, individual parcels in the 6 to 8 or 9 acre size. There's maybe combining things together, you might get a tract of land that would get above 10.
See, a lot of times, you know, you hear these, well, just like, I still hear about the milk plant in St. John's. You know, that's 100 acres. And if we're gonna attract that type of industry to this area, we have to have a place to put it. And we have to look forward and say, where might these be? And, you know, to me, this makes perfect sense.
See, lots of nodded heads.
I have I have some questions. How do I put this? So this large tract here, this lot A, this area A that we're talking about, it's currently agricultural, and industrial. That opens it up to practically any sort of heavy industrial use, warehouses, things of that nature. Yes.
It would. We have 2 industrial districts right now, light industrial and a general industrial. They allow different things. Certainly in our planning, we can be clear in what direction we would prefer the property to go from a zoning perspective. But yes, in general, industrial is a pretty intensive activity no matter what. You have truck traffic, even for warehousing and distribution center. You have a lot of truck traffic, a lot of potential noise in the area around it. You have, if you have other kind of industrial operations, you may have fans or generators even to provide certain functions of noise issues.
So I have a kind of a tangentially related question, and I hope you can answer this. But things such as like because you mentioned generators, but things like the wind generators that we have, or like solar cells, would those be considered industrial use, or are those zoned differently?
Those are actually right now in agricultural use. They're a special use in the agricultural areas of the township. We do allow utility scale solar as a special use in the ag district. We allow utility scale wind turbines in the ag district. So similar to what you see to the north of us in Isabella Township for the wind. Now, I will say one thing. There is one difference between what our ordinance allows for wind turbines and what is built to the north of us. And that is, our ordinance has a limit of, it's under 500 feet, as I recall. I'm not asking you to know right offhand, but if you remember.
Yeah, it's not that high.
Yeah. The turbines to the north of us are close to 700 feet, I think 650 or something like that. And that is kind of the standard now. When our ordinance was drafted a number of years ago, the 400 and something was the standard.
Okay.
To the south of us in Gratiot County, those tend to be more about 350 feet high, which was the standard when they were developed. We've not amended our ordinance, and for us, frankly, there is some challenges with doing wind because of the airport. The airport zoning, there are height restrictions that actually restrict, at least in the northern part of the township, would restrict wind turbines from being there. But anyway, yeah, wind and solar would not be part of the industrial district. If somebody wanted to build a solar array manufacturing operation, or a plant that built wind turbine blades, they could do that. But,
Gotcha. Thank you.
Do you all coordinate with your counterparts in neighboring townships on, like, if we're gonna go industrial right up to the border, the other side is, how does that work in terms of being neighborly?
Well, that's a great question. The State Planning Act actually requires us to share what we're proposing with our neighbors around us. So as part of the adoption, first of all, when we decide to update our master plan, we have to send a notice to everybody around us. Say, we're going to update our master plan. we've done that. And then when we have a draft plan, your first action related to potential adoption of that plan is actually to recommend to the Board of Trustees that the plan be sent out to the surrounding communities. They have a chance to, Board of Trustees essentially has a chance to say, yeah, we're okay with that, or no, you need to do some things before we're gonna let it out the doors. But anyway, that's part of the process, is we have to send the plan to all the surrounding communities, so it's City of Mount Pleasant, the surrounding townships, including those that are on the corners of our township. We send it to the Isabella County, we send it to a number of other agencies, railroads and airports and such, all to invite comment. And they have a certain number of days, I think it's in the range of about 2 months, to provide comments back on the plan. So they'll see whatever ends up in the draft document. Now in this case, in this particular site, the lower part of A there, actually where you see the letter A, below the word Somerton, almost directly across the street from that, on the other side of Somerton, is a very, very large electrical substation. It's a regional substation. It serves a lot of the area, and it's taking a high voltage line that's coming from the east, and then basically distributing that power. So although the land around it is farmed on the east side, there's a very large, what looks like an industrial facility on that side of the road. So. Now, what it will say is that, well, I'm certainly looking for direction as it relates to these things, just make sure they're heading in the right direction before we put meat on the bones. I'm not necessarily expecting direction tonight if you're not comfortable. If you are comfortable, I appreciate Commissioner Gross's comment. I'm sorry to call you Scott. Commissioner Gross's comments. But you certainly don't have to provide direction tonight. This is something we can continue over. Would you like to move on to the next one for now, or would you like to consider this one further?
You mean to the next section?
Well, Site B.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So Site B is, this is basically surrounding the jail. This property is currently planned sort of a mix. The Isabella frontage has some light commercial planned. The area where the jail is and the property farmed to the farmland, most of the farmland to the east of it, I'm sorry, to the west of it, is planned residential, low density residential. And then the land, that little part going up north of Remus Road is zoned right now commercial. It's planned basically recreation. It's similar to Maury Courts. So it's sort of a mix of things. The jail changed, ultimately changed the future of this property. We have no control over the county deciding to put the jail there. But it did certainly change the potential for this property to be rural residential, for example. The part that's planned for kind of low intensity commercial along the Isabella Road frontage, that's just the changing conditions over the last decade, certainly the last 5 years, that we are way overzoned on commercial. Between the city and the township, we have far more land zoned commercial than will likely be developed in the next 10 or even 20 years, unless something drastically changes in how people buy stuff. So that even that designation for commercial no longer really makes a whole lot of sense. But with the jail there, as I said, the residential really just doesn't fly anymore. And so this is a site that certainly could be something else. And it is a site that has potential, mostly because of the freeway frontage, but also because of the availability of utilities, to be something more in the range of an industrial type activity. There are, as it notes, there's land available certainly for 30-acre projects, something like that. It's kind of a bigger piece. There is also, because of how they sited the jail, there's some land on the east of it, between it and the freeway, that could be another site for warehouse or industrial of some sort, maybe a little smaller scale. The land to the north, while right now separated by Remus Road, it's a dead-end road. There's no utilities in it, and so conceivably there might even be an opportunity to combine those together to make a more functional site and shorten Remus Road at that location without harming anything. There's no plans to build a bridge there now or anytime in the future. But those are all things that are potential there. The key there is really, again, in this case is roads. Remus Road has been paved up to the jail driveway, both driveways, the east driveway. I don't recall. I don't believe it was paved to an all Class A all season standard. But if it was going to be industrial, that it would need to be a Class A all season road, because you need to be able to deal with heavy truck traffic and not have seasonal frost law limitations. Isabella certainly is a all season road, and this site has the benefit, significant benefit, of having probably the best freeway access of any of the sites we're talking about. Because coming northbound, you can get off at the south exit and make a right on Isabel Road, basically right off the freeway, come up to the site, and to get back on the freeway, you just travel north a mile or so, and you're at M20. You can turn the corner and get right on the interchange there, going either north or south. So it is an interesting site from that perspective as well.
You said that road on Remus is not a Class A road off of Isabella going back towards the...
I don't know for certain, but this is what I do know. It was partially paved. They had to pave more in order to put the jail in. That was your requirement as part of the special use permit for the jail. They did do that, but it was not required to be a Class A road because the jail doesn't require it. The jail's not running heavy trucks back and forth. They're running passenger vans for prisoners, or they're running cars for the deputies. So there would be no seasonal restrictions related to their activities there. They're certainly, they would be receiving deliveries, but that's something that can be dealt with. Even the size of delivery vehicles can be adjusted to deal with the seasonal restriction, or timing can be adjusted. So the jail does not necessarily have to have a Class A road. I don't know if they built it to that or not. That's something we would have to find out.
If it is not, for the sake of conversation, if it is not, then you're saying, and we have some industrial activity that's going to happen, are you saying from Isabella to basically to the dead end, it'd have to take up what's there?
It really should be a Class A all-season road if it's going to be an area that's industrial. Now, if the site is designed properly, they could take a separate access off of Isabella. I mean, for example, if this was a kind of designed as a planned industrial park, they might have a different road that comes off of Isabella, goes back through the site, and provides that access without needing to use Remus Road. But from our perspective, from a perspective of what we may want to stipulate is needed before this property is ready to be industrial, my suggestion would be simply require that Remus Road be a Class A road to serve the site.
I remember having a lot of discussion about that when we were going over the plans.
They didn't want to pave it at all.
Yeah.
I think, as I recall, they were going to have to pave a little bit of it to get to their west driveway. But initially, they were wanting to have the east driveway be dirt, so the idea is they wouldn't be going around that way as often. But they did, and they also didn't want to fix the road to the end. If you recall, the road to the end was basically a 2-track, and it had a very muddy, poorly formed turnaround at the end. And to their credit, the road commission came in and fixed that. They regraded and compacted everything, and it functions very well now. Is this a site that you're comfortable with looking at, potentially adjusting the future of it?
Yeah. I mean, you're, the end game with this is potential rezonings.
Yes, well, the end game right now is a master plan that designates land for the future, yes.
Yeah, but if we were to adopt this, the township were to adopt this, some model similar to this with these large tracts that are designated as industrial, then the next step would be rezoning.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess I would say this, the next step would probably be to look at those infrastructure issues and plan for those before rezoning.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things right now is there's been a change in the last 10 years related to how economic development happens. In other states, many other states are very, local governments, regional governments are very proactive in developing industrial sites. They buy the land, they put in the roads, they put in the water and sewer, and then they basically make it available. So they go through the whole step. But they actually own the land and then sell it off for development. Or they may even, in some cases, build the buildings and then sell or lease the building space. In Michigan, we don't have as many mechanisms to do that, other than our DDA district. That part of what a downtown development authority can do is own property, develop property, and even lease the developed site. Anyway, there are actually a growing number of programs at the state level to support local government doing more infrastructure work by providing grants and such to help make it possible to actually prepare these sites in some way that they could be developed into industrial. So having a master plan that designates these things and even identifies, hopefully pretty specifically with the information ultimately from our engineer, what's needed, there would then be an opportunity perhaps to be working, especially through our Middle Michigan Development Corporation, to identify opportunities for state grants that might help make some of those things possible. Support road improvements, for example. Work with support the road commission in making improvements to some of these roads.
I mean, I'm comfortable with, in the respect of having all the information. The rezoning part, that part,
That's a down the road.
Yeah.
I know that we do need to think that far ahead, but that's well beyond.
Yeah. I mean, even in theory, I suppose, or you will eventually come up with a future land use map and a whole draft for the master plan. And then hopefully some people in the public will look at it and give us comments on it prior to approval, in which case, if they see this, then, they'll have a chance to tell us whether they, if we hit a red button, then you'll know before it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't look at any of this and think it was unreasonable, so.
We don't necessarily have to go through all the sites because D and E, for example, are basically almost entirely planned and zoned industrial right now. We'll talk a little bit about D in a minute, but Area C, I wanted to make mention of one thing. Area C, this is around our Enterprise Industrial Park. The Area C is really two areas. The area to the east is the area that fronts on Somerton Road. We really just talked about that. We have some part of that is zoned industrial, part of it's actually zoned residential. We'd like to just plan it all for industrial. So that side of, and most of that is owned by abandoned industries, not all of it, but most of it. So it's an industrial user there already, but it makes much more sense for that all to be part of the industrial park there. The side to the west or southwest that wraps over Broadway, that one's a little bit more interesting one. The part of that site there that's north of Broadway, that's mostly the Mid-Michigan industry site. They have a building, they have some vacant land next to them that's actually planned commercial. I think the building may even be planned commercial. it's really, it's part of the enterprise industrial park. Some part of the park is actually planned and zoned commercial and not industrial. This is an area that really ought to be industrial, both because it keeps actually a little better with what MMI is doing, but it also would make good use of the vacant land that they have around them. The site to the south of Broadway Road, if you've driven by, there's an antique store there. There's been a series of secondhand stores or antique stores. In the past, there was some auto repair activities apparently there quite a long time ago. None of which complied with any ordinance generally. Almost everything there is non-conforming. It is actually zoned commercial, so the antique store is lawful use. The site is non-conforming. There's no paid parking. If you walk up to the building, they've some very muddy area. You have to kind of traverse some stuff to get across to it. It is a site. It's about 9 acres that backs up to the tribe's industrial park to the south of it. It has houses to the side opposite the freeway, and of course the freeway on the other side. It is a site that makes more sense really as industrial than it does commercial, because Broadway is coming down at that point, coming out the freeway. It has really only one access point at the bottom of the slope from the freeway overpass, and has very little. You can see the site, but it's not very accessible. To be commercial, you need to be easy to get to. The site is not easy to get to. But for warehouse, industrial activity, you're more looking for visibility from the freeway, access to the freeway, and it would have those things. It's not a big site, so it wouldn't be a lot of activity, but it certainly could be better used as an industrial site. And most of the site is vacant. That building that's there only occupies at best about a quarter of the site. So that's a site that we're thinking might function better as part of essentially the extension of the enterprise industrial park. The item D there, this one, the main thing I want to mention is the area on the east side of it. This is the area kind of centered around Packard Street and Corporate Drive. Wings, the auto junkyard is there. Up to the north of Corporate Drive, that we have a little small area in the township that's industrial. There's several services over there. The ambulance service is located there, and some other industrial activities. To the east of Wings, there's some small building. There's some vacant land, and there's a little extension of Corporate Drive that goes east of Packard and kind of dies out. There's actually road right-of-way that goes further than the road does. It looks like a driveway that goes to a house that's at the far end. But in that space over there, there's about 26 acres of vacant land that is essentially in the same space as the areas that are zoned industrial. 20 of it is planned and zoned rural residential. I'm sorry, medium density residential. It's not rural, but it's 20 acres of vacant land. It has it backs up on the backside to the homes that are on Belmont Street. So certainly, if it were to be changed to industrial, there would be a need to have some screening there, as with these other sites that have residential near them. But our ordinance deals with that actually now pretty well. But anyway, this 26 acres is 3 parcels. Would be very suitable for industrial activity if we had the Class A all-season roads. This is the site that probably has the worst road access. And there's existing industrial land there and existing industrial users that are on dirt roads in this area or on private roads. So this is a site that we'd like to plan for industrial. It's also in our East Downtown Development Authority district, where we have some potential funding available to make some things happen with the roads and with utilities and other things. So that's basically where we have that one. We'll have some concerns from the neighbors on Belmont Street, but I believe those can be addressed both by talking about screening and separation from those homes, which can easily be accomplished, I think there's even some utilities, some electrical utilities run there. We can't get close to their backyard anyway because of those electrical lines. So there's opportunities to have some separation there and have some screening between the two. Generally see nodding heads there. E, as I said, is all zoned and planned industrial. That we've talked about the weaknesses with that site because of the airport. So I'd like to talk about F. F is the most unusual of the sites. It's down back at the south end. It's south of south of Broomfield. It's on the west side of the freeway, so it's closest to those utilities, water and sewer. It has a very small access point on Isabella Road. It has a larger access point on Broomfield, but there are several houses there too. And there's one house on Isabella, small lots around the fringe of this. It wraps around pretty high density, multiple family. This is actually a couple of lower income housing, multi-family developments, and then the part of it, one part is market rate, multiple family. It is a site where I wouldn't be looking to have industrial activity that makes a lot of noise or has a lot of odors or other impacts on those neighbors. But it is a site that could be something like warehouse or distribution center. If it was designed well, that could actually perhaps even be a source of jobs for folks that live in this area. That one of the benefits of this site is the proximity to potential employees. It is an awkward site, shape-wise, and because it has a lot of residential around it. But nonetheless, it has some potential. Certainly, let's call it for a light industrial or limited industrial. I think that was the language I used, limited industrial activity. And it's largely because it already has the road access potentially. It already has utilities, at least the closest, most easily extended utilities down at that end. And it has the freeway frontage that many of the industrial users want to have.
What is the area to the immediate south of F?
That large square there is, this, asked me earlier, do we consider property owners? And to an extent, I did not give you a complete answer. Because we do consider one particular property owner, and that is the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, and they own that square.
Yeah.
We don't have any control over what they do.
Sure.
We could plan for it, but they are a sovereign nation, and they certainly don't have to in any way follow our plans. So.
Well, that's a good reason why that's not blue then.
Yeah.
At least at this point in that.
Right.
Some of us old timers call that the old coon farm.
Oh, yeah?
Would there be any issues with having to work with the tribe if we were to develop that land, since it borders there, similar to how we asked if we had to work with a neighboring township?
Well, the tribe would be one of those entities that we would share the plan with, because they certainly are an adjoining jurisdiction. It is always good to work with your neighbors in any way possible. It sometimes can be challenging from a development perspective to work with the tribe because of how the tribe is required to work in terms of the land they own. For example, up in the Enterprise Industrial Park, you sort of see it here. The Enterprise Industrial Park is really a U. It's not a square, it's a U. And the reason it's a U is because there's a long, skinny piece of property just to the west of Enterprise Drive, which is the main north-south road through the industrial park, that is tribal owned, and it's part of their I believe it's a trust property. There's a couple of ways tribes can own land, and depending on how they own it, what the status of that land is in terms of how we relate to it changes. But that's tribally owned land, surrounded by our park. They don't talk to one another. When the industrial park was developed, that piece of property was not considered at all. It's just simply the backyard of all those industrial sites or commercial sites, some of them. When Taco Bell went in on M20 over there, the township required Taco Bell to provide a cross-access connection to the tribe's land. Just to set it up for a future cross-access connection. But there was a need to have an easement that would say both sides could have that access point. And I wasn't here at this time, so I don't have the whole story, but essentially to boil it down, the tribe was not able to, or did not provide that easement. They didn't allow for that to happen. So when you go into the Taco Bell, you make the turn, you go turn to the right to head around to the drive-through. What you'll see right in front of you is some parking spaces that have kind of an unusual curb structure there, and that's where that cross-access was supposed to go. More recently, the tribe has had some informal review of a potential connection because they've been looking at potentially using that property. But at this point, they would have to work with Taco Bell to get it because there was no easement provided. And at this point, it's no longer required. That is certainly the challenge. We do definitely want to try to plan in a way that respects their ownership, respects their potential use, and we want to hear from them if they have concerns. But coordinating the two can be somewhat challenging.
The pieces that you mentioned that currently have houses on them, I think you said some of the C properties, and F, and D, I guess. The township would be in the position of one of two things, either waiting for, all those people to eventually move out or whatever, or, buying up the property at a premium, or I suppose the eminent domain route or whatever. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of how practical is it to try to focus on something that already has people living on it?
Well, we've seen tonight that the township in the past has planned for its zone land, industrial, that had houses on it. Those houses were there before the zoning was there. Good or bad, whatever you think of those decisions, rezoning more of that land industrial than currently is planned for it, or not, that is what happened. At some point in the past, that land was planned and zoned industrial, despite the fact that it was currently homes. That certainly does happen. We're looking long term, so we're looking at what do we want this community to be like over the horizon, 5, 10 years from now. Sometimes that does mean that certain residential areas might change over to something else. We want to do it in a way that protects value and protects the rights of those homeowners. And we do that. Our zoning ordinance has the strongest protections for what the ordinance calls a non-conforming single-family home. These homes that are zoned industrial right now, if a tornado wiped them off the map tomorrow, and we certainly don't want that to happen, but if it did, wiped completely to the ground, they could build it back. And they could build it back on an existing foundation, or they could build it back on a new foundation. The ordinance would allow them to build a new home, completely new home on that site, and allow the non-conforming single-family dwelling use to continue, even though it's zoned industrial.
Mm-hmm.
That's how strong a protection we have for single-family homes. So even if we were to plan these sites for industrial, obviously we wouldn't necessarily rezone them to it. But even if we planned for it in the future, even if we did rezone it, they would be fully protected because of the existing provisions in our ordinance.
Yeah, which was kind of my point. In other words, I understand that this is a future thing in, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But we've also been talking about, these other places that are, 30, 40 years, they haven't, attracted industry. I guess I thought the point of this was to identify some parcels that could be gotten ready in a relatively short period of time where you would actually start hopefully attracting actual businesses into.
Right. Well, and certainly would. The sites, the existing residences are fairly small lots around the edge of the site. There's still road access to get into the site F directly from Isabel Road without affecting any of those existing homes.
Yeah.
Certainly from the Broomfield side. On the Isabel Road side, as I said, I believe there's a small access there. That one's a little more troublesome. I recall there's a drain or something that makes it kind of tight. But there is, you certainly could access the large farm part of this, the vacant part of it, without affecting the homes, if somebody were to choose to do that.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I don't see anything here that's a red flag. I would suggest kind of proceeding, but open it to other people's thoughts.
Good work. The only thing that I can potentially think of is the lot A. I know it's the largest lot and the biggest area to use for large industrial, but the fact that it's currently zoned for agricultural, it's currently in use by farms, it's not just sitting vacant, and there's multiple different private ownership in the area, and one of our number one goals is to preserve our natural resources and our agriculture. I think that would kind of be a little bit in conflict with our overall plans, even though those sites are like the best geographical sites. That's my biggest concern. All these other areas, they look really good. There's valid concerns. There's valid reasons for all of them. I'm pretty in agreement with all those. It's just that the A1 that I have some concerns about.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments tonight. We'll certainly take those into account. Overall, we'll continue to proceed in this direction, taking into account the comments, and there'll be more to come, both in this and other elements of the Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was our new business. So we're at extended public comment. This is a portion of the board or the meeting where individuals are invited to address the Planning Commission on any item, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not. We'd ask you, once again, give us your name and address for the minutes and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Extended public comment is open at 8:42.
Hello, Allison again, 975 South Isabella Road. I kind of wanted to just address that it wasn't, my letter was not an application. I have not submitted that. From my understanding, it's several thousands of dollars to do an application, and I don't just have that as pocket change. I guess what would be my next steps as far as like going about the process that property did as well to getting my property rezoned? Like I don't know that next step. Not trying to compare our two properties, but I kind of had done a little bit more than they have. Like I did approach all of the neighbors that surround my lot, except going across the street to Dellfield, just to verify that like nothing on my property is interfering with, again, with like the visual concerns or the smell, which I didn't know about that property until tonight. But I did approach like all of those other homes, as well as behind me where there's like a lawn care company. Their only concern was that like when I had ducks previously, I had a duck that went into their pond. But otherwise I did approach my neighbors and none of them seemed to have an issue with my home being changed or anything like that. Like I have downsized over 90% of my animals, and as far as like your guys' concerns with how many animals is too much, I have like a very, very large pen to accommodate all of the animals that I did have. And I know that you had commented earlier today about, I apologize, I can't read that far away. I know you had commented like when is too many, as far as like what would be the reprimand moving forward. There is things that can be done in place as far as like if it was an animal hoarding situation, then it can be addressed that way and everything. And there's still the concerns if the neighbors brought complaints forward and everything. I guess I don't know like what are the next steps to get it approached that way, or is that not a possibility?
Well, I think it would be up to us to discuss it, whether we wanted to go down that road or not.
Okay.
If you're talking about a township or a planning commission initiated rezoning, which is what that other one was, we would have to decide to do that.
Okay.
I don't want to make a big long back and forth, but let me just ask you: did you approach Keith Fate?
Kurt Fight.
Kurt Fight.
So his wife owned the property that I currently reside on, and previously when I had spoken to his wife with my father, she didn't have any problem with it. The current person who's in that property is a renter, and they seemed, when I spoke with them, I apologize, I don't remember the man's name I spoke with. When I spoke to him, his concern was their property at 943, because of like the eyesores in the yard, the animals were coming over to his property, and he did say he approached them multiple times and that nothing was done about it, but he had never had any of mine come over onto his property. So as far as, he didn't even know that I had them except for when he had seen my geese. Otherwise, he didn't know I had like chickens and all of that, but now we're just down to the geese and one goat. But otherwise, like on the other side where it's now Denny Mitchell who owns that property, he had no concerns about the animals. He comes over and he'll pet them and everything. And then behind there, it was the lawn care company, and they didn't have any issues besides they just didn't want the ducks going in the pond. But those were the only issues that I had spoken to the neighbors about. There were none that had said anything about like any smells as far as coming from my yard. As far as I knew, it was the concern of their property and the fact that the neighbors had to then put up those 6-foot walls in order to like get rid of the eyesore, I guess.
Okay, well, we're getting close to 9 o'clock here, but I was gonna suggest we have a brief discussion about whether to, put this on next month's agenda or not. There's clearly a difference, though, just in the sense of in the one case we acted on tonight, the property immediately to the north was already R1. If 975 would be sandwiched between two properties that are currently still I1.
Correct. And the one Kurt Fight's property is utilized as a rental, so I don't know, 10, 20 years down the road, I don't know if he plans to change that. My property was also owned by the Fights, and that was used as a rental, and so was the property right there on the corner. The Fights owned that one as well and was used as a rental. My father had plans of purchasing all of those. We only made it 2 in, and the third one, we didn't purchase that one. And he had plans to use it as industrial as well as what it was used for. But it's just hard because again, like you said, my property is sandwiched right there in the middle. But yeah, I would appreciate if it was looked over and considered. And moving forward, I would make sure that all of my animals were contained and make sure that I'm being of the respect of all of my neighbors on all sides as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Any other public comments while the extended public comment is open? Okay, seeing none, thank the public for their comments. We'll go ahead and close that at 8:49. So the next item is final board comments. So again, I just thought in a couple minutes here just to kind of take stock of this situation and we could do exactly what we did with 943. We could, say no. We could, if there's other factors to consider. So I'm just curious what people's thoughts are.
We would need to do another public hearing, correct?
Oh, yeah, it'd have to be that along those lines.
I think I would have to be consistent in my reasonings for voting on the 943 property. As I think Tom also mentioned, like, we have to consider the future land use and the specific zoning concerns, and not so much of, do I like chickens, do I hate chickens, do I like the people, do I hate, do I not like the people? And unfortunately, again, I think it comes down to the fact that as the Planning Commission, we don't have I mean, we have the authority, but we don't have that much leeway. You know, we have a very clear plan of what this this land is intended to use for, and as you said, it'd be sandwiched in between industrial properties, and clearly these people want to keep them as industrial properties. It would, as I think as we discussed last month, it would create a lot of turmoil to try and rezone this whole chunk, this peninsula of land, other than industrial, because there's already so many industrial uses to it, and trying to carve out exceptions here and there just doesn't seem feasible, regardless of what our personal opinions are.
Okay, other comments?
I think I agree with that line of thinking, Commissioner Brown, just because, you know, we resolved an inconsistency in the line earlier, but this here would create an island.
Mhm. Let me ask this. We were just looking at Rodney's new map, or not new map, but this proposed thing. You've got E is bounded by River Road to the north, if I'm reading this correctly.
It is, yes. What I was looking at, and what we were looking at in terms of this evaluation, is land that is along the US 127 corridor.
Yeah.
And so that's why we did not take it further. The actual current industrial zoning and ultimately the area planned for industrial would go beyond that.
Okay.
Because Delafield Industries, for example, is on the north side of River Road there.
Yeah.
It's a large industrial site. The next, just to the west of Delafield, is our water treatment, or sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
So there's areas up there that would be industrial or planned for it,
Yeah.
even though it's not part of E.
Okay. I mean, in some respects, and now I'm looking, this is from the future land use map. You know, I suppose there's an argument to be made that this piece, right, that's sticking out to the east is itself maybe long-term, maybe you don't want that. I don't know. I think I would want, just speaking for myself, I think I'd want to go out there and spend some more time on that property and kind of get a feel for, you know, what it's like and so on. But I think it would make sense for us to not jump on something right now that on the property in that spot, but rather try to address it through the future land use discussion.
Actually, those properties that front on River Road there, north side of River Road, as part of that extension to the east, those two large parcels have industrial activities on low intensity. Nothing over there is very high intensity. I believe some of the smaller parcels also have industrial activities on them of one kind or another.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think we had discussed that last month, and that was like I said, like, regardless of our personal feelings, just the fact that they're already in industrial use, like we would have to, yeah, like you said, do the future plans, and then at some point in the future, rezone them when they're no longer in use in that regards. But if they're currently in use like that, I would find that carving it up like that would just make more of a mess.
It would almost negate why we did what we did today.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Okay, any other comments? All right, so this will be that area is an area that we're gonna continue to look at as we work on the future land use, but I'm not hearing much, if any, support for moving ahead right now with a rezoning of that one piece. So, okay. All right. Any other final board comment related to that or not? Okay, if not, then we've completed our agenda for tonight, and we will stand adjourned until November.